research in AIs and getting access to compute resources should be accessible for everyone. The meme coins search and the congestions are very annoying. They've cost us a lot of headache and wasted time. On the other hand, meme coin madness and congested chains, it is something that the blockchain needs to be ready for. We're seeing huge leaps in performance of AI. Everyone experiences it, but just interacting with ChatGPT, it's very impressive what these models can do. This is just the start. I think ChatGPT-like models are impressive, but I do think that there is so much more that these models will be capable of soon. GPUs are the hardware required to run artificial intelligence, and there is a shortage of them right now. So using Web3 technologies and DePIN, we are able to create large accessible grid of this hardware that any company can tap into.
Hi, Jesse. Welcome to the We Are DePIN podcast. How are you?
I'm doing good. Very happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, my absolute pleasure. And where this came from really is that we had a good conversation in Dubai for Token 2049. And, after that, We Are DePIN and Minima, we wanted to build a community of DePIN projects. And your Nosana and yourself came up as one of the first people who wanted to get on the podcast because you're doing some amazing stuff, and I know your community is really bullish on what you guys are doing as well, which is amazing to see. So I guess jumping in, what is Nosana? What are you guys trying to do?
So Nosana is making artificial intelligence more accessible and affordable for everyone. And how we do this is by creating a GPU grid that is completely decentralized and open source, where anyone can get access to the GPU hardware that is needed to run artificial intelligence. So there are some technical terms there. If needed, I can go into a bit more detail, but I think the high level is that GPUs are the hardware required to run artificial intelligence, and there is a shortage of them right now. So using the latest Web3 technologies and DePIN, we are able to create like a really large accessible grid of this hardware that any company can tap into to partake in the AI inference industry.
We had a couple guests before who were talking about lack of GPUs and the shortage of supply of GPUs. Now it's a huge problem. So just talking about the problem a little bit from your side of things. So when you're saying access to GPUs, so what's the, just very briefly, what's the problem that you guys are solving here?
So how this basically got started was I studied artificial intelligence in university quite a while back. And while I was working on my master thesis in the lab, actually together with Sjoerd, who's the co-founder of Nosana, we were building this research for our project. And there was one thing that was continuously like holding us back and stopping us from completing our research. And this wasn't like a lack of inspiration or lack of time or anything. It was like getting access to the GPU hardware to run these experiments. And it was extremely hard. We had to wait countless hours in frustration to run our AI models on GPU hardware. And this was almost 10 years ago. So if you look in the last 10 years, artificial intelligence has grown by over 1 million times. It's like an insane large growth. It's way larger than Moore's law, which dictates how quickly hardware grows. So if it was hard to get access to GPUs back then, these days it's nearly impossible for like smaller players, startups, or researchers to get access to the GPU hardware to innovate and run models. If you look now at basically the distribution of GPUs in the industry, there's around 10 companies that own by far the majority of GPU hardware, like Microsoft being the biggest one of them. They dedicate most of their whole inventory to OpenAI services like ChatGPT. So it's insanely hard for companies and other players to get access to this hardware. And this means that specifically researchers and solo developers, smaller companies, or even large companies that haven't invested heavily in GPU infrastructure are struggling to participate in this market. So when you look at the innovation and what's happening in the AI space, it's largely being dictated now by those 10 companies that actually have the hardware. And I think this is something that bothers me specifically. Like I really would like to see a future where AI is way more being defined by hackers, smaller contributors, researchers, and we see way more innovation in that segment. And this is what we're trying to solve at Nosana by providing a GPU network that anyone can get access to. That's like completely open. And this is the problem that we're
Mm.
solving.
So would you say the wave of AI innovation is currently being hindered by the lack of GPUs for, for the smaller companies out there and the new companies that are innovating right now?
Yes, I would say so. Yes. So um, to make like foundational models is like that's one of the things that requires a large amount of GPU power. That is definitely only accessible for people that own large GPU clusters. That's one side of it. But if you look at using AI for business purposes, like when we talk about using AI, the technical term for this is doing AI inference. This is something that Nosana heavily specializes in. It's different than creating new algorithms, which is called training. Inference is the side where when you have a trained model, like Llama 3 is a popular one that might some people might recognize. When you have that model, you can interact with it, which is called inference. And on the inference side, there's actually a way bigger amount of compute needed on the lifespan of a model. So, like if you look at the lifespan of a model, 30% of compute power goes into building and training it, and then 70%, and most often even more than that, goes into running and using the model by actual end users. And this is also something that currently, if you want to do that at scale inference, it's also very costly and hard for companies to do. So they're kind of, I think most companies right now are stuck using APIs of the big providers like ChatGPT in order to build their innovations, which does hinder them in creating very custom or
Mm.
local running
Mm.
innovations.
No, it makes a ton of sense, and it sounds like it's incredibly important and needed right now, especially when AI is the one of the biggest innovations of human history, right? It's so important, and if it's being hindered by this, it sounds like a massive bottleneck that needs to be resolved. Where does Nosana come into this?
So how Nosana solves it is because there is a shortage of GPUs, right? That's one of the reasons we have this problem. Like all these big companies, they saw the AI hype before any of us, and they purchased like a lot of the GPU power, trying to get as much as they can. Because having more GPUs in these days still means that you have more power in this market. You can do more. You can train better models, and right now, more GPUs means more influence and power in the AI market. So it's a very valuable resource, obviously. And how Nosana solves it is by looking a bit further than the cloud market of GPUs. We're looking at the consumer market. If you look at the production of GPU chips, the main company producing chips is NVIDIA. A portion of that goes to cloud providers. This is specific hardware, and another portion, and actually a way larger portion, goes to the consumer market, and these are mainly gaming devices like NVIDIA 4090s or the higher end chips that go into gaming hardware. But there's also other high end hardware like mining rigs that people purchase at home to do cryptocurrency mining. And this is a very large amount of GPU power. It's actually a lot bigger than the total cloud GPU size. It's estimated that there are over 300 million consumer devices in the world right now that are capable of running AI inference. And what we see in practice is that these devices are way more capable at AI inference, like they're way more performant than cloud devices. This is just by the nature they're developed. They have a bit less memory, but they're really efficient in doing the computations quickly. And inference of AI, like I just described, can be done extremely efficiently on these devices. So what Nosana is doing is reaching out to all these devices in people their homes, often catching dust. I mean, if you talk about a high-end gaming rig, these often get used intensively for maybe 4 hours a day when there is a cool game in the market, and then they sit at home doing nothing for a while. So we're making use out of those, wasted hours that these devices are sitting at home, and we allow the owners of the devices to earn some income on them by connecting them to Nosana. And at the same time, we're making the GPU grid available for all these startups and people that want to run inference and give them access to affordable hardware.
Mm. That sounds really interesting. I mean, again, it sounds like a no-brainer. It's like there is a supply problem in terms of there's a lack of GPU power, but then on the other side, it's connecting the surplus GPU power that already exists to the people that need it, and the people who own, and as you said, they're gamers and they're only using it for a few hours a day. They can earn money from, actually helping companies innovate within the AI space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Like there's a lot of GPU power out there. There's also like smaller clouds, and there's different players, I think, in the DePIN space that are making GPUs accessible. What Nosana is uniquely trying to do is really looking at that latent hardware, that wasted hardware at people their homes. We call them the consumer GPUs, and making those accessible. So that it's quite a big engineering challenge, and there is a lot going on behind the scenes there, like making them reliable
Mm,
and making sure the interface and the geographical distribution and all of
yeah.
that works well. So that's what we're solving. Like that's the deep end challenge that we're taking on. But the power is there, and yeah, our mission is to make that available for the
Yeah, that
industry.
was actually my next question, Jesse, because my question is, yeah, there is an AI wave at the moment, but before there was still, renting out GPU power would have still been very, very beneficial for companies around the world. So my question is, why has this not happened before? In terms of, we've got the term deep in now, but why has this not happened before the AI wave existed?
So before it's a good question. The AI wave is quite recent. If you look at when, for example, ChatGPT came out like a year and a half ago, several months later, we saw the first big open source models coming out that were able to compete on and efficiently on some scale with what OpenAI was doing. And this was a really like this innovation was very important and big. And I think after that, people started to run and fine tune and work with these open large language models a lot themselves. And at that moment, I think the GPU needs really surged. And I think at that moment, we've seen a lot of companies spawn to try to address the GPU shortage in different ways. And Nosana being one of them. We've been building this for like 2.5 years. So we started like before the AI hype or boom started. But like it definitely things accelerated in the last like 6 months. We've seen like this real change in the industry. I think before there were some companies in a Web 2 way trying to achieve similar things. Like there is some providers of GPUs out there that have been trying to accommodate the industry. But in the Web 2 setting, we're still seeing a lot of of issues, especially I think growth of these networks is hard. Um, and also yeah, I think supplies kind of dried up because there was such a surge in demand that currently, if you're a researcher or a company that wants to reserve a decent amount of GPUs, you have to like get contracts in place for quite a long time, like maybe year-long contracts. You have to reserve them 4 or 5 months ahead, and these are just it's not very flexible or on demand or like spot based in the cloud that makes it convenient for people to use these devices. So yeah, the accessing the consumer side of GPUs is, I think it's been tried and trialed, and it's not an easy thing to do. But this is the right moment in time for it to succeed. That's what we believe.
Yeah. So why now? Why is now the perfect time? And I guess, like, as an extension to that, why is blockchain and deepen the answer?
So the timing definitely has to do with just the pure power, the capabilities of these models. Now we're seeing like these huge like leaps in performance of AI, like everyone experiences it, but just interacting with ChatGPT and like this, it's very impressive what these models can do. And this is just the start. I think ChatGPT like models are impressive, but I do think that there is so much more that these models will be capable of soon. Like there might be some new architectures coming out to accomplish this, but there will be so much more that these models are capable of that we need like um, to because we're going to see growth in the models more and more. Like over the last few years, there's been such an exponential growth in the number of models coming out that if this continues, we need to make sure we have like a really reliable compute source for all this innovation. We cannot even predict right now what the models that are coming out. Like I think we're gonna see some crazy stuff that we cannot even think of right now coming out, that AIs will be way more sufficient in operating in the real world. And like I think this is just the start of the AI revolution, but the compute foundation needs to be solid. So that's why I think the timing is right. Today is like the perfect timing for establishing that network where it's not going to concentrate power too much to a few big players, but to really that decentralized spirit of anyone can contribute to this compute resource and anyone can make use of it, and it's transparent, and we're not going to empower certain individuals, countries, or companies with like owning that hardware to make this all tick, to make all the AI work. That has to happen now.
Mm.
Like that's now is the time, and DePIN is the solution, in my opinion. I think probably many people here listening to the podcast are also agree that DePIN is just the technology that makes this decentralized hardware infrastructure possible. Like depending on the definition you use, I guess, but like the to have blockchain support these networks, like to define. I'm a pretty heavy decentralization maximist, so I try to make things as decentralized as possible. So Nosana, even the job matching, the registration of nodes, everything happens on chain, and then we do it like really decentralized, which means that the code is auditable, the code is even transparently running on the blockchain, and anyone is sort of able to contribute and make use of this network. I think that's the power that's needed to make this work for the future.
Mm. But I guess like why blockchain and not like more of a Web2 solution? You talked about it before, like that it wasn't working very effectively, but what about blockchain makes it so, what makes it so powerful, I guess, when it comes to building solutions like this?
Um, there's a few like practical reasons for it, like just being able to pay people in microtransactions globally, or being able to not have like to be borderless, so to be able to operate in all countries, and these are really practical things that blockchain can give you because it's a decentralized network. Anyone in any country can join, and anyone can get they can get all paid in rewards using cryptocurrency systems. So then there is some other arguments like tokenomics that can really support and incentivize the parties involved, which is also really important. I think all of these are very valid use, like positive elements that help. But for me, the one most important property of blockchain is the decentralization aspect. So what I don't want is that Nosana becomes one entity that's basically owning all this compute hardware and gaining like a large amount of power on it. For example, by being able to censor GPU usage, or being able to, if you say this algorithm, we're not going to run it, or this people from this country, they cannot use
Mm.
GPU power because of these political reasons. I think that's a big danger that exists if one company would be in charge of that hardware. And blockchain will like I think it's the only technology out there that can achieve this true censorship resistance in that aspect, where anyone can contribute and can make use of this network equally, which I think is what is required to make AI work
Mm.
well and be beneficial to everyone.
Yeah, but I mean, you see a lot of discussion on AI on the news, on Twitter, newspapers. It's all over the place in terms of how amazing it is. But there is an argument on the other side about how it can be like weaponized as well if it does get into the wrong hands. So like I don't know if it's a case of, I don't know what your sort of opinion is on this, and how sort of Nosana comes into it. But what are your sort of like views on that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion. I'm absolutely on the side where in no way we should restrict like research and access to AI. So I think in no way like we should really encourage more research, and I think this technology is life changing in many ways. And of course, it comes with dangers, and they need to be addressed. But I think just research in AI should be accessible to anyone, should not be censored, and getting access to compute resources should be accessible for everyone. Of course, in like the uses of AI, that's where, in my opinion, censorship should, or like more like law enforcement should be focusing on. So when people actually put AI into use in the world, that's where people can break laws, and we should be really enforcing. And it's a really interesting topic.
Mm.
I'm honestly, I don't have the answer, but I think on that layer, it's fair to restrict and to law enforce in the ways that it is needed. But on research and compute power, I think we should not have these restrictions, because that's where innovation happens. And I think, yeah, restricting people from accessing that is a very bad way to go.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And yeah, as you said, it is a very important and complex discussion. So yeah, I was just interested to hear your take on it. But in terms of the future of Nosana, so where are you sort of, what's your vision for it going forward now that you started and it's been going for 2.5 years, you said. So what's the next step? What's your sort of like long-term vision for Nosana?
So we want to make Nosana the biggest GPU grid in the world, and we want to make sure that we are stable enough and scalable enough to support the biggest needs for GPU inference. Like, we want to be able to serve companies that do like billions of inferences daily. And there's companies that need to do that right now that simply do not have the GPU hardware to do so. I think that's like the ChatGPT scale of inferences, and there's only one player that can currently do that. So we want to make Nosana capable of serving those large quantities of inferences, which means it needs to be stable and user friendly, and we need to overcome a whole bunch of hurdles to get there. But yeah, that's the dream, to have the network that big that a small developer, a hacker can basically use these GPUs to create their models and experiment. But we can also um, scale this to the biggest players that need to serve their millions of
Mm.
clients. That's where we want to go.
Nice. And do you see Nosana going into different industries and different sort of use cases? Because once you have that network, you can go into different industries and use cases, right?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. Like, it depends. Like, we're currently focusing on the industry where of like um, more smaller sized companies that are very experimental. So often companies associated with universities or research groups, because they're very experimental, and our network is experimental at this point, in that we are not as stable as a cloud where everything is very much managed in one box, in one big factory, to make sure it runs smoothly. We are running in thousands of households across the globe, and we're trying to have blockchain technology make this more stable. But at the moment, we're in a test grid phase, and we're working with more experimental groups. But we intend to grow into more and more sectors of like SMBs and larger companies to be able to serve their workloads as well. Um, but in the end, what we offer is a compute resource that can be used even beyond AI,
Mm.
and that's also, I think, if the need arises, if there's like specific technologies, maybe zero knowledge proofs, or like there's all these other technologies that require GPUs. There's opportunities there as well to make use of Nosana's grid in the future. But yeah, we are
Mm.
definitely staying open and dynamic in that
And
sense.
what would you say is like the challenge of building something like Nosana? Because it's sound with more decentralization comes challenge, because you have to get to a critical mass of GPUs first before you can actually offer the service that you want to offer, right? Because you're offering idle GPUs, but um, you know if you only have a small amount, not all of them will be idle, and then the service that you're offering to these AI companies is sort of non-existent. So you have to get to a critical mass first, I'm assuming. So what are the sort of like challenges when it comes to growing something like Nosana?
Yeah, there's many challenges. Building deep in technology comes with, I think, some classic challenges. Like for us, one big challenge is just because we're trying to build this very decentralized. We're running a lot of it on chain. When you run things on chain, they're actually decentralized, and we also make this all open source. So that's how we're trying to build like a strong community around it. But it means we get like the classic problems associated with blockchains, where you need access to RPC nodes that can handle the workloads. When the blockchain is unstable, like we're working on Solana, it's not unstable, but there is these periods of time where there is congestions, and it's hard to use high frequency transactions on chain. our product also suffers. So stabilizing that is of course a challenge, fun engineering challenge. But once you get into a real production workload setting, this needs to be very well taken care of,
Mm.
which is something we're currently still solving. Then there is the challenge of like scaling the GPU, like the consumer GPUs in a proper way. I think this is sort of more unique to Nosana as we're working with households all over the world. We have to make sure that if someone has an internet connectivity issue, maybe temporarily, or someone closes their devices for some reason, there's just way more outages and fluctuations in performance that are happening in household settings than there are in data centers,
Exactly.
which is what we have to solve. So yeah, that's a whole different challenge that we're currently working on. There's a lot of other projects in history that have worked on these types of problems before, so we have a lot to look at. And in this unique situation that we're in, we're trying to come up with like a very practical way to make this work, and we think we're getting there. But another big challenge to scaling is that we're now currently at around, I think, maybe going towards 1,000 devices connected. Um, but we're getting a lot of demand and also a lot of supply coming to us that want to connect as well. And we're trying to get all the technology right now in place to make this work on a scale of maybe 10,000, 100,000 devices at some point soon.
Mm. Jesse, I want to get your take on Solana actually, because you built a deepen project on Solana, and Solana as on in the community right now is it's mainly known for meme coins. It's mainly known for, but I mean the price itself is it's soared so much in the last sort of 4 or 5 months. So what's your experience been growing a deepen project on Solana?
I think Solana is great for the properties that it's good at, like fast, cheap transactions. That's and unlike a lot of transactions, that's what Solana does well, and why Nosana benefits from that. Like the only possible in Solana type um, pitch is like these properties, and it's also why I think Solana has positioned itself as a deep in chain, like the home for deep in, like so we've been using it happily for quite a while, like already since we launched like 2 years ago. We've been running on Solana, and it's been working well for us. I think the ecosystem is great. There's a lot of bigger names in DeepIn that have been around for a longer time that have migrated to Solana for these reasons as well. So the fact that you can run a lot on chain and the ecosystem of DeepIn project is very valuable. um, I have to admit, like I said, I'm quite positive about Solana, but I have to admit that the meme coins surge lately and the congestions are very annoying. Like I obviously wish they weren't there. They've cost us a lot of a headache and wasted time and trying to fix things. On the other hand, it's good. It's like meme coin madness and congested chains. It is something that the blockchain needs to be ready for. So I just really hope that this gives us another opportunity. The Solana ecosystem gets another opportunity to make this more robust and to make the infrastructure more resilient towards these types of usages, because it happens now. Nosana is also still in a testing phase. Like we have a test grid with only select clients running workloads. So we're happy it happens now, and once we go to production, we really hope that it gets solved. We have confidence that it will. Yeah, that's my take on the
Mm.
space.
And what's your thoughts about the deepen space in general? Like, what are some trends that you're following personally that you really like?
So in Deepin in general, I really like Deepin, like this idea of creating really scalable, decentralized physical infrastructure networks. It's something that really appeals to me. I'm of course very much focused on the GPU side, GPU AI side, and honestly, I'm not that much looking to the left or to the right. I'm mainly
Mm.
very focused on the GPU space. But I do think I'm happy it's flourishing now. Like I think the concept has been around for quite a while, and it hasn't been the most popular or the most shiny concept out there. Like there's been many projects building DePIN, I think, that never were really recognized or got really popular. But I'm happy that now this is changing and DePIN is becoming one of these ultimate like beautiful showcases of decentralization and the power of decentralization, which I'm very happy it's in the spotlight now
Yeah.
after all this time. And yeah, so that's a good
No,
thing.
I fully agree with you, especially because the last bull market, I would say like the narratives were really like NFTs and metaverse, and now it's changed towards like RWA and DePIN, both of which I think have amazing use cases that can actually impact people in the real world, and it can bring a lot of people into the Web3 space that maybe weren't associated with it before. I mean, prime example, what you guys are doing. You're targeting gamers to provide their GPUs. A lot of those gamers, I know there's a lot of gamers that would come into Web3, but the gamers that aren't, they can actually make money through the AI wave, innovations. So it's a very good thing. I personally am loving this narrative, and I've been following the DePIN space for a long time anyway. But yeah, so I'm completely with you there. I completely agree. Now, yeah, gonna have to wrap up the podcast there, Jesse. But before I ask you like the last sort of few questions, um, what are your favorite use cases of DePIN outside of maybe Nosana? I know I asked you a similar question, but what are your sort of favorite use cases?
Yes, so great question. I think there's so many like lovely use cases of DePIN. One of the cool parts of DePIN, and also why it's nice that it's part of this bull market, is that it's so easy to explain to people as it's physical world, and all the use cases are kind of more resonating than DeFi or NFTs, which just sounds silly for the regular non-Web3
Mm,
person. But to name one, like one example I find interesting is the like uh, for example, just to name a project that I like, what they solve is Hive Mapper, where they're
mm,
building like sort of a Google Maps type, like live traffic and recording images from dash cams and putting that into like a mapping system. I think is incredibly cool because yeah, that's something that before was really only possible for these huge corporations that have access to all that data. But now we, like as a community, building a data set on an application like that as a decentralized community, I think is a really cool DePIN use case that's easy to talk about and it resonates with people.
for sure. All right, Jesse, we're gonna have to wrap up there, but it was such a pleasure having you on and talking all things AI and Nosana. So how can people stay in touch with you and what you're doing?
Yeah, you can, I think, best follow us on Twitter. So I'm on Twitter with at Jesse Eisses, my first last name. And then Nosana is at Nosana AI on Twitter. So yeah, please follow us. And yeah, happy to have you in the
All
community.
right, fantastic. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Jesse. And yeah, I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you.